Founders, what's going on? You guys know I love in-person events, and they are back. The recording you're about to hear is from our most recent event where we had hundreds of founders come together, share intimate details, templates, KPIs, OKRs about their business, and it was something special, We'd love to meet you in person. If you want to see the next live events we have coming up via our schedule, the link will be down below in the description. If you're listening on iTunes, check this out on YouTube. You'll see the links in the description, or you can just Google Founder Path or Latka next event. We'd love to see you in person. In the meantime, though, enjoy this recording. It's a good one.
Great to be here. Let's see here. So again, my name's Ben Murray. I'm founder of the SaaSCFO.com. A little bit about myself before we dive into tips and tricks, do's and don'ts with fundraising. Also applies to the exit process if you're ready to pull the cord. Of course, CFO by trade. Been in finance accounting my entire career. Little known fact about myself, I actually spent a year outside of finance accounting as a programmer in the late 90s. Anyone guess what programming language was in high demand in the late 90s? Think Y2K.
Hey, Ben.
COBOL. Yeah.
Ben, can you hold the mic closer to your...
Oh, sure.
Thank you.
COBOL programmer for about a year before going back to grad school. So eventually got into software back in the on-premise days. Perpetual license, we charge 15 to 20% as maintenance, and then morphed into ASP, and then now what we have SaaS today. I still remember my boss came to me when I was working for a healthcare tech company, and he said, "Hey Ben, create subscription pricing for our on-premise EMR product, and just look at how far we've come today." So talk today about tips and tricks to increase your odds of funding. And the first thing, of course, I'm a CFO, going to talk numbers. The second thing is story, and then finally being prepared. So first, know your numbers. And I love this quote. This was a quote from a founder that I talked to a couple months ago who said, "Hey Ben, to be honest, the numbers are a little fuzzy right now." And that's okay. We just have to build upon that foundation so we can speak the language of SaaS. So the first thing that is one of my biggest fears, of course my biggest fear is running out of cash, but is being in a board meeting, investor meeting, potential investor meeting, and I get a number wrong. Or I botch the forecast, or I misinterpret the data. So same thing for SaaS founders, that you also have to understand your financial profile. What's working, what's not working. And in my next slide, I'll get into the SaaS P&L, but we need to understand our business. And SaaS is math, and I didn't come up with that quote, but I love that quote because there's so much data that's locked up in our business. So there are a lot of metrics today. Yesterday we probably heard NDR about 100 times, but we need to understand the metrics that drive our business. And it's also the right stage at the right time for these metrics. When I talk to a lot of founders, early stage pre-revenue, they're like, "Hey Ben, I need to calculate CAC payback, CAC, SaaS magic number, all that stuff." It's like, just wait a second. It depends on the volume of data in your business to make these accurate, or to make these metrics measurable and accurate. But we have to understand the right metrics at the right stage for our business. Some of the common ones, the popular ones, of course, growth is battling with net dollar retention as a top valuation metric. Best in class, you see 115, 120% and above. SaaS CAC ratio, or the cost of ARR, and actually Pascal mentioned that yesterday, is the dollars that you put into your sales and marketing engine, what do you get out from that? So what's the cost of ARR? So does it cost you, if you put $1 into your sales and marketing engine, do you get $1 out? That's the SaaS CAC ratio. Dollar for dollar is a good goal or less. And then your payback period. I have here 12 months, but it just depends on your ASP, your go-to-market motion. Your sales cycle is 12 months good, 6 months, 1 month. And I talk to a lot of founders who, in a due diligence process, they throw their data over the fence to the investors, and the investors come back to them and tell them how their business is operating. Say, "Hey founder, we crunched your data, here's your margins, here are your metrics." But I want it to be the other way around, that you can speak that language with your potential investors. And the second thing here is your SaaS P&L. I've looked at hundreds of SaaS P&Ls in the past 12 months, and I'd say 80% of those are wrong. So the P&L here is what I consider, there are not many standards in SaaS, but the accepted SaaS P&L. And 80% that I've seen are wrong, 10% are kind of close, and 10% are actually spot on. So I'll run through quickly, this format of the SaaS P&L. So the first, at the top, of course, your revenue streams. Having those distinct and clear. That recurring is separate from one time, separate from other. I was coaching a founder and his finance team who was going through a Series B or Series C for 50 or 75 million and pitching potential investors. And he actually had, all his revenue was in subscriptions, but he actually had a subscriptions and usage model. So when he started talking about pricing to potential investors, they said, wait a second, you're showing all your revenue in subscriptions, but you actually have a usage model too. And so they made him go back, reread all his contracts, and break out his revenue between subscriptions and usage. So really important to have clear revenue streams. The second is COGS, cost of goods sold. So what does it take to support your revenue? Do you have tech support? Do you have onboarding through services? Customer success, I put it up in COGS if they don't sell. And then DevOps, so your hosting architecture. That takes us down to gross profit or gross margin, and then our OpEx profile. So R&D, sales, marketing, and G&A. What does that look like? Where are you investing there? So 3 common mistakes that I always work with founders on, and usually I'd say around 3 million ARR is when you have to get serious about your accounting. So common errors, rev rec. So if you invoice in terms longer than a month, you have to apply revenue recognition to your revenue. So that's pretty common. Early stage, you're not doing that, but I'd say around 3 million, it's time to get serious about your accounting. And the next thing is your department structure. To produce a P&L like this, you have to code expenses to the department level. You can't have just a big bucket of expenses. And if you exported your QuickBooks or zero P&L right now, would it show that structure? Or are wages just posted to one account? So you don't know, is that R&D, sales, marketing, G&A? And finally, the chart of accounts underneath your P&L, the accountants, we work on the structure, which is called the chart of accounts, to set this up so we can produce the SaaS P&L and then produce the downline metrics. And then the forecast playbook, so don't start from scratch. I've got tons of models, forecast models, templates, pitch deck templates that everyone will get here today. And I'll work with Nathan to get that out the door to you. But building upon the SaaS P&L is the forecast. And my templates alone have raised, I'd say, at least over $100 million when founders come to me and say, hey, Ben, I use your templates because you could download those for free from my site. And so key areas that I look at to create a believable forecast, because I don't know, at this point I've done thousands of forecasts, is your top of funnel. So do you have self-service sign-up, website visitors to trial to paid? Do you speak the bookings language through your CRM system? So what's driving your revenue in each revenue stream? What's your pricing? Do you know customer count, ASP? The layers of your MRR, expansion, downgrade, churn, so you can create an accurate forecast. The next is delivery of your revenue. So whether it's your 5th customer, 100th, what does it take to support that revenue stream? Do you need tech support, services, customer success, DevOps to support revenue? And how is that scaling with revenue? And then finally, your OpEx profile. A lot of people look at your OpEx profile as a percent of revenue. I like that for R&D and G&A, but not sales and marketing. I use metrics for that. And then overlaying that is people, so your headcount roster. Who's on your headcount roster? Who are your contractors? And who do you expect to hire over the next 12 months? And if you think about your business model, you'll be able to put together a believable forecast. And of course, I love talking numbers, but we also have to talk about our story. And I'm a guest host on a podcast, just interviewed a SaaSCFO at a $100 million plus ARR company. And one of his tips, he said, whether you're early stage, 1 million, or 100 million plus, you still have to tell your compelling story. And your metrics will back up your story. So hard for me to say, but of course, don't just talk numbers. So it's your job to craft a compelling story. So your team and experience, how is that unique in your market? What's the problem that you're solving? Not just features and functions. How are others trying to solve it? Maybe they're using Excel and there's no technology in the space. And also with this last bullet, I think competition is a little bit good. I know we get freaked out when we see other players in the space, but that shows that there's actually spend in your addressable market. You could have a $50 billion addressable market maybe, but maybe they're not spending any money in that space. So again, I've got some SaaS pitch deck templates that you can use that will get out to you so you can make this job a little bit easier. And then TAM, so total addressable market. So this last bullet, please don't say we're going to capture X% of some $50, $100 billion market. Let's think about this from a bottoms-up perspective. I really like looking at your pricing model times the number of total customers in your space to figure out, is that a $1 billion market, 5 billion, 10 billion, 50 billion? And then also, I think Armando mentioned yesterday, that balance between your go-to-market model, pricing, and ICP is super important, not just in pitch decks, but I work with founders on this all the time, that if you're pushing out a 2,000 ACV product, right, you're probably not going to hire an enterprise sales rep to sell that. So there's got to be balance between GTM, pricing, and your ICP. And investors also look at your revenue forecast to see, is it growing slowly? That shows maybe there is an addressable market, or is it growing nicely that's supportable that shows, hey, there could be potential here. So at TAM, your analysis is in the hot seat. How you're thinking about your product, how does it apply to the market, and your ICP. And I think this was mentioned today, know how you use those funds. Be specific. Come prepared to discuss details on how you're going to invest those funds in your business. So think about the SaaS P&L, and where are you investing? Do you have to support the COGS infrastructure? Are you going from founder-led sales to sales and marketing? So where are you investing? And then finally, I know as SaaS founders you can spend a lot of money, but what milestones are you going to hit? So yeah, I know you can spend $1 million, but is that to get your first 10 customers, your first $1 million of ARR? Is it to move into an ancillary market, a different geography? So with that money, what milestones will you hit? Oh, sure.
I was just wondering, how do you show how you're projecting budget and how you're going to spend your money? There's so many ways to do that. Excel spread. Do you do that in the P&L? Because like the P&L often doesn't match up with the reality of how I'm thinking about investing in things. So I'm curious how you navigate that reality to how the investors think about it.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I help founders with in the forecast, it helps us size the investments that's needed. So how much cash do we have to go in and get, to go where we run out of cash to fund the next stage of the business? So part of it is forecasting. I think when Andre showed his P&L or his slide, he showed the buckets. All right, I'm spending on R&D, sales, marketing, whatever. So very specific on where he wanted to spend. But when I work with founders, it's through the forecast exercise process to see, all right, where do we run out of cash? How much cash do we need to get to that next milestone? But the founder, you have to tell me where you want to, I can't make that up all the time. You have to tell me, like, hey, these are the next things we've got to work on in our business. Is it to go from founder-led sales to sales and marketing? Or do we have to continue to invest in the product roadmap? So with that input, then I can forecast and then figure out, all right, does that get us, to that next date, where we can...
Hey, this is where I'm expecting to, in this S&M, this is what I'm going to be putting in. SDRs, this, that, the other.
Yeah, it's almost like an a la carte menu. I'd have a slide that shows, all right, we're going to invest in 10 sales reps. We're going to invest in a couple software engineers. It's going to cost X. Yeah, cool. And then finally, be prepared. So due diligence is a lot of work. Exiting is a lot of work. So are you prepared? So when you go through a due diligence process, if you've done that, it takes a lot of work, and it's going to become your second full-time job. So it's hard to casually raise. So are you in or are you out with this? Because you've got to build momentum. You've got to respond quickly to investors. And then also, I just reviewed a pitch deck this week of an early stage founder, and we got to the end of the pitch deck, and there was no ask. So what are you asking for? Is it $500,000? Is it $2 million? So put that in there. And then also we talk about product market fit, we talk about go-to-market fit, but what about founder-investor fit? Because with this, I've been in a lot of meetings that a lot of SaaS investors can speak that language, speak the SaaS language, but do they know your niche? If you're in healthcare tech, gov tech, do they know the landscape? Do they know the competitors where they can help you out? Because I've heard this, their business model then becomes your business model. So there's going to be some little creep down into your operations. So founder-investor fit is very important, just like hiring an employee. Do you want to work with that person for the next couple of years? And then also the due diligence playbook. I've got some checklists that you can download to see what you're getting into when you go through a fundraise or an exit process. Usually the preliminary due diligence checklist runs, say, 7 to 10 items. Of course, your historical financial statements, but your revenue and customer data. So a common request is revenue by customer by month, and what investors will look at with that is what's your GDR, NDR, and logo retention. And then they want to know about your go-to-market performance. So how does your pipeline look? How's your sales team doing? Are your reps hitting their quotas? And then finally, of course, they always want financial projections. So download my checklist, because the preliminary due diligence checklist may be about 10 items, but if you go through an exit process, it's probably going to be 50 to 60 items. So be prepared about what they're going to ask, so you're not kind of blindsided when you get to that point.
Ben, are any of these playbooks on your website?
Yeah, all of these playbooks are on my website. You can download my forecast model. You can download prelim.
What's your URL domain?
It's SaaSCFO.com.
SaaSCFO.com.
Yeah. And we'll try to get all these templates out to you, but yeah, all this can be downloaded for free. And then finally, the final piece here is you need a team. It takes a lot of work. So pulling data is a lot of work. So who on your internal team is kind of under the tent? Who's going to help you with this fundraise or exit? And then finally, line up your legal and your corporate attorney and tax accountant, because CFOs kind of dabble in this. We can be dangerous, but we're not the experts. So have a good corporate attorney, have a good tax accountant lined up ahead of time. And then also, don't contact me mid-raise. And I have a lot of founders reach out 2 weeks out there. Hey, Ben, I'm talking to investors in 2 weeks. I need a forecast model. I need metrics. And it's just too quick. Whether that's reaching out to me, any of your advisors, it takes time. And I tell founders, like, hey, I want at least 3 months of runway here to work out the forecast, to figure out the data that we need to calculate the metrics so we can talk intelligently to investors, and also we feel confident in these numbers. So 3 months is 3 close cycles, 3 forecast cycles, so that I have enough intuitive feeling about the numbers that we can calculate the metrics and feel good about those numbers. So have a little time runway. I love when founders reach out to me and they say, hey, I'm thinking about a raise in 6 to 12 months. Perfect. We've got time to put the financial discipline in place, the financial reporting, the data, the metrics, that's going to drive your story. So in summary, talked about numbers, knowing your numbers. Make it easy for investors to consume your data with a nice SaaS P&L. Just yesterday, going through the revenue growth charts with the SaaS Shark Tank, there's confusion. Well, is that recurring revenue growth? Is that one-time revenue growth? So we don't want to get into these meetings and take up time trying to interpret the numbers. Let's make it really clear so we can talk about the numbers and move on. And then your story, again, talking to a SaaS CFO, $100 million AR plus company who had a VC and corp dev background, it's still about the story, whether you're $1 million or $100 million, and the story is actually backed up by the numbers. And then preparation. And then finally, with the forecast, I forgot to mention that, Rami mentioned pumping the brakes yesterday, which is so great because just operationally, mentioned, hey, we keep pulling the forecast down. We keep pulling the forecast down. And that's just like, say, that creeping delay with your flight. They delay it 15 minutes, 15, then 30, and you get so pissed off. We should feel the same way if our forecast keeps coming down. And that's the importance of a budget. It holds us accountable because I know there are a lot of budget haters, but if you compare it to a budget, if we had a budget and we keep pulling it down, it's like, all right, why are we off? How are we going to recover? But if you never set the benchmarks, then you don't really know how you're performing. So just one last thing there. And then, of course, being prepared. It's a lot of work to go through due diligence. So make sure you have the data in place ahead of time, your forecasts, your metrics, so you're not surprised by any of this. So that's it for tips and tricks, do's and don'ts.
Guys, give it up for Ben Murray, the
Yeah,
SaaS
thanks.
CFO.